Look at a map of colonial Africa and you'll notice something wild. France took a massive chunk of it. We're talking about nearly half the continent, from the Mediterranean coast all the way down to the Congo, stretching across the Sahara into West Africa. Here's the thing. When this was happening, France was internationally isolated, politically unstable, and weaker than the other European powers. So how did a nation that had just lost a war to Germany end up with the second largest colonial empire in Africa? Let's find out. France's colonial past. France's empire building didn't start in Africa. Before the Scramble, French colonies dotted North America, the Caribbean, India, and small patches of the African coast. But the 7 Years' War changed everything. France lost most of Canada to Britain, though they spitefully handed Louisiana to Spain before the Brits could grab it. Napoleon briefly got it back, just in time to sell it to the United States. Then Haiti broke free. Napoleon preferred conquering Europe, which everyone else resisted. After his final defeat, he was shipped off to St. Helena, and France became the continent's problem child. The isolation era turns out, conquering your neighbors, carving up their kingdoms, and forcing regime changes doesn't make you popular. After Napoleon's defeat, the other European powers, Britain, Russia, Austria, and Prussia, routinely sidelined France. When France did get involved in European affairs, everyone made sure it didn't gain too much. But this united front didn't last long. France realized something clever. If they framed military interventions as serving the common good, nobody would stop them. Case in point, Algeria, 1830. Officially, France wasn't invading to build an empire. They were stopping the slave trade and piracy from the region. And to be fair, they did stop it. But as a bonus, France now had a foothold in North Africa to expand from, and none of the other powers could really complain. Napoleon III and strategic expansion. By the 1850s, France had a new strategy: cozy up to Britain. Emperor Napoleon III allied with London during the Crimean War and the Second Opium War. Suddenly, France's power was being used to help its former enemy against Russia. The British weren't threatened anymore. So France expanded. Algeria's conquest continued slowly. Napoleon III also began conquering Vietnam and what would become French Indochina. Why? Same reasons as every colonial empire: resources. France didn't have at home people to tax and conscript captive markets for French goods, a permanent presence in East Asia for access to China. Spreading Catholicism. Britain had Protestantism, Russia had Orthodoxy, France wanted souls too. Napoleon even grabbed Nice and Savoy from Sardinia in 1860, claiming it was done by popular referendum. Britain didn't buy it. Relations soured. The Franco-Prussian disaster. Then everything fell apart. France's attempt to create a puppet state in Mexico failed. Then a dispute over the Spanish throne led to war with Prussia and the North German Confederation. The French army was crushed. Napoleon III was ousted. A republic was declared. From this victory, Germany unified. France was humiliated, isolated again, and dropped to fourth among European powers. But France's new leaders had one goal: restore national prestige. The plan? Build a massive colonial empire. The scramble begins. Since most of the world was already colonized, France would have to fight for new territory. The easiest target? Africa. France already had Algeria and coastal holdings. Most of the interior was unclaimed. France could grab as much as possible and avoid conflict with other Europeans. Not everyone in France was happy about this. President Jules Grévy fundamentally opposed colonialism throughout the 1880s, but real power lay with his prime ministers and the military, who were very much in favor of imperialism and conquest. By the mid-1880s, France had taken huge swaths of West and North Africa. This surge in European interest led to a problem. Overlapping claims meant potential war. So German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck called the Berlin Conference in 1884. The Berlin Conference. The conference set ground rules for the scramble for Africa to avoid bloodshed, of Europeans, that is. Common misconception, the great powers didn't carve up Africa at this conference. They agreed on principles. Officially, they all claimed the main goal was ending the slave trade. If they happened to become insanely wealthy in the process, well, that was just a fortunate side effect. And to be fair, Europeans did effectively end the African slave trade by the early 1910s. The conference also established one critical rule. To claim territory, you had to actually occupy it, with flags, forts, and soldiers. This priced out smaller nations like Spain and Portugal from significant expansion. But for France, game on. French public opinion. Back home, French opinion was mixed. Prime Minister Jules Ferry was forced out in 1885 due to public discontent over excessive wars of conquest. Many believed young Frenchmen were dying in Vietnam and China for negligible gains or corporate profits. Even hardline conservatives worried that overseas empire building would distract from France's real goal, revenge against Germany and reclaiming Alsace-Lorraine. But African conquest had more support than Asian wars. It was romanticized as ending slavery, deposing despots, and saving souls. Plus, barring disease, the wars were quicker and easier to sell to the public. Why no one stopped France? So why didn't other powers stop France's expansion? Portugal and Spain were too weak. Germany couldn't project enough power across Africa. Then Kaiser Wilhelm II fired Bismarck in 1890, gutting Germany's diplomatic talents. Suddenly, France's isolation ended. Rising fear of Germany made it easy for France to find willing partners, especially Britain. Britain had two demands: stay away from the Suez Canal. Keep clear of South Africa beyond that. London was happy letting France and Italy grab large chunks of Africa if it kept them out of German hands. France also wanted an empire that looked impressive on maps, massive, imposing, a source of national pride. The fact that huge portions were desert or sparsely populated didn't matter. By 1914, France controlled nearly half of Africa. World War I and aftermath. When World War I finally gave France its war with Germany, French colonies proved their strategic value. France conscripted hundreds of thousands from its African territories to fight in Europe. After the Central Powers were defeated, Germany lost all its African colonies, and some went straight to France, supplementing its already massive holdings. France would hold most of these territories until the 1960s, when, like Britain, it all came crashing down during decolonization. So that's why France ended up with so much of Africa: strategic timing, clever diplomacy, British support, German mistakes, and a desperate need to restore national prestige after humiliation. From isolation to empire, France turned weakness into one of history's largest colonial holdings. If you enjoyed this deep dive into colonial history, hit that subscribe button. We've got more stories like this coming your way. Thanks for watching.